We don't vote for the Obamas and the Hillary Clintons who have made it a point of keeping our kids dumb and enslaved in these bad schools so they can get on the streets like this before the election so they can win their votes. And if we believe that God, the life, the sanctity of life, then we need to not vote for people that believe our kids are profitable weeds. So if we do that, I personally believe that that same small minority of blacks in our country can not only pull our community back from the abyss, but it can pull their entire nation back from the abyss. And I think we can do that by just communicating, getting back to basics, become a political free agent, and let's look at the blessings we have of being Americans versus those that are trying to convince us that we should not be proud of who we are.
You know, that's a message that I say on every show. Just open your mind to the ideas of what you want your government to be like, not necessarily the people or, voting for the jersey, to coin a phrase. Yeah. You don't just vote for the laundry and go down the line. Think about what you want to do. Listen, folks, pick up Liberalism or How to Turn Good Men into Whiners, Weenies, and Wimps. It's available now, right, Burgess?
It's available now, Barnes & Nobles and Amazon, and please join me on my Facebook page. For years, my goal is to set up a place where we can respectfully talk and discuss issues and educate ourselves. Education, guys, education is how we beat socialists. Let's do that, and together we'll pull this thing back and get our pride back and our vision back and make sure that all Americans are succeeding and excited about being part of this great nation.
Fantastic. Find Burgess Owens on Facebook. Check out the book. And finally, if I may, because I am talking to a Super Bowl champion. If you could help out with my fantasy team, I finished in 4th last year, and I'm looking to improve. So any tips you may have, I would greatly appreciate.
Well, I tell you, look to me for improvement. We've got a real problem. Gene, I tell you, when they stopped paying me back in 1983, I stopped paying attention. So that's how long it's been. I am the worst guy to try to find out what the latest. You let me know when to have the next draft where things are going. I can probably take hints from you at this point.
Wow. Okay, that. Now we're in trouble because if you're looking for tips from me, we're in trouble. Burgess Owens, thank you so much. This has been so much fun, man. I appreciate this so much. And listen, my pledge to you: we're going to continue the conversation past this and beyond the election cycles because that's the way we solve problems in America. Thank you so much for your candor.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And together we'll do this. You give us a platform. Together we'll get this message out. And it's all about team, guys. Let's just win, baby. Let's get this thing done with.
Just win, baby. Thanks so much.
If you want to rob a bank or run a red light, then there's something you should do first that'll make it all right. You can break any law without any oversight if you change your last name to Clinton. You can lie to the feds or just act like a jerk. Make a crap ton of money without doing any work. Plus, you can sleep with your staff as an added perk if you change your last name to Clinton. The SEC, the FBI, the House of Representatives, they just don't apply. You can have all of your enemies mysteriously die if you change your last name to Clinton. Sell special favors to the communist Chinese. Charge $100 million for some speaking fees. Tell that sexy intern to get down on her knees. You can do it if your last name is Clinton. Collect lots of cash through your private foundation. Store top secret info in an unsecure location. And somehow secure the Democratic nomination. You can do it if your last name is Clinton. Nothing to it if your last name is Clinton. Oh, it's against the law? Screw it. Your last name is Clinton.
Behind Enemy Lines. Back on the air. It's a pleasure to welcome to the show the Chief Investigative Reporter for Judicial Watch, my new friend, Micah Morrison. Micah, how you doing, sir?
Good, Gene. Good to be with you.
So, before we started recording here, we started talking about this. To me, it's a groundbreaking article that you've written recently for Judicial Watch. It came out last week, calling New York and this new age of corruption the new Tammany Hall. Why don't you tell everybody why you chose that title?
Well, and Gene, it's great to be on with you and your listeners. This is such a terrific show. The reason we chose that title is because we're trying to point out that it's not just isolated incidents of corruption in the de Blasio administration and even connected to more powerful Democrats such as Mrs. Clinton. There's a real pattern here. There's a roadmap, and the pattern resembles the old Tammany Hall, and I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with Tammany Hall and the phrase Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall was the corrupt Democratic Party machine that dominated New York City politics for over a century and extended into every corner of New York civic life. Bribes, kickbacks, fraud, extortion, graft. Today, we're witnessing what we believe is the birth of a new Tammany Hall. And that's similar in many ways, but also different. And I think one of the things we point out that is different is that these days there are more effective laws. We have to, sort of acknowledge that and be thankful for that. There's more effective laws against outright bribery, extortion, and graft, but there's also people, as always, as is human nature, finding their way around the laws. And much of this revolves around what in the old Tammany Hall, a figure from the old Tammany Hall, a very famous figure called George Washington Plunkett, a corrupt Tammany Hall operative from the late 1800s into the early 1900s. George Washington Plunkett famously said, "I seen my opportunities and I took them." And what we are saying now is that there's a new Tammany Hall which is seeing its opportunities and taking them on a colossal scale. Now, Plunkett also identified what he called honest graft. Today we would look at it as a crime. It wasn't a crime then, but today we would look on that as a crime. And basically what Plunkett was saying is that we are gaming the system for ourselves and our friends. We are gaming the system for the benefit of the powerful and the well-connected, and then we throw a few crumbs to the common folk. At Judicial Watch, and in this article, we believe that's what's happening today. There's a new Tammany system evolving. And we believe in Brooklyn, there's a great case study for how that system evolved, and that's the Atlantic Yards Project, a Barclays Center, now called Pacific Park, but everybody really looks at it as Atlantic Yards. And very briefly, Gene, and I'll let you get to your questions, very briefly, Atlantic Yards offers what we call a case study of how the new Tammany system has evolved. And it involves a number of different elements. We call it a roadmap. Very briefly, those elements are manipulation of state funds, your taxpayer dollars, in other words, the so-called agents of the city controversy that Mayor de Blasio was involved in, the so-called three men in a room corruption schemata up in Albany, where three men in a room, the governor, the two assembly leaders, the assembly leader and the Senate majority leader, run the show. Eminent domain, which as many of your listeners know, that's how Atlantic Yards receives. Sales, overseas connections, so the people who owned Atlantic Yards bought it with taxpayer dollars, flipped it, as we say, show in this article, they flipped it and they sold it to a Russian mogul and the Chinese. And then the manipulation of what's called EB-5 visas, where people can basically buy a green card and get into the country, and the money flows to the Atlantic Yards developers. So in short, that's the system, and we lay it out in the article.
Yeah, it's almost mind-boggling to see the connections from one to the other, and they may not necessarily be acting in concert with each other. You know, the people in New York City may not necessarily be, you may not see the connection to the three men in the room, as we like to call it, in the People's Republic of New York, that seem to decide everything over the state budget. But when you put it all together, it becomes so overwhelming. I mean, where do we start with all this? Do we start with the incompetence of Bill de Blasio and how he has let his agents take over running the city? Is that where should we start there?
Yeah, I think that is a good place just to start with the incompetence of Bill de Blasio, because as we say in this article, the old Tammany Hall was really run by criminals. I mean, they were powerful. It was a powerful political machine, and it did get things done for the people of New York, but they took a vast profit, which was not entitled, which they were not entitled to, and that belonged to the people of New York. In the new Tammany system, when you look at Bill de Blasio, what we say in the article, he's no criminal genius. He has more emerged as more of a pawn than a prince of the city, that he's insecure, he's in over his head, he's buffeted by money players he can't seem to resist, and he's presiding over and accelerating pay-to-play scandals that have cast a pall of political death over his administration. So de Blasio is basically, he's a player in this, but he is not like some central evil genius. And really, in fairness, we don't think there is any central evil genius. It's a bunch of people manipulating the system. The margins are probably, well, we know there are crimes being committed because U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara is arresting people left and right. And, Gene, I should add, the Republicans are involved in this as well. We'll get to the Republicans in another article by Judicial Watch, but New York City is a Democratic city. It's run by Democrats. They dominate 6-1 in the voting ranks. And so when you talk about corruption in New York City, you have to start with the Democratic Party. And when you do start with the Democratic Party, you look at the money people, you look at the developers. My thesis is a lot of this is tied up with the real estate industry, which is tremendously powerful in New York City and New York State. And we focus on a guy named Bruce Ratner, who many of your listeners will be familiar with. He is the central figure in the battle over Atlantic Yards. He's the central developer. He is a master of honest graft. He's not been charged in any crimes, but he's repeatedly courted controversy with unfulfilled promises of public benefits, multi-million-dollar paydays, and links to crooked politicians and their enablers. So you have a guy like Bruce Ratner, and he's an important supporter of not only Bill de Blasio, but Hillary Clinton. So take a look at Bruce Ratner. Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign headquarters is in a Ratner building in Brooklyn. Ratner and de Blasio lobbied hard to bring the Democratic National Convention to the Barclays Center. Didn't happen. De Blasio was an important early supporter of Ratner's Atlantic Yards bid. And Ratner was a longtime donor to the Democrats. He was involved in the 1996 Bill Clinton campaign finance scandal. He was a guest in a Lincoln bedroom. He attended the White House coffee event, and a link between Bill de Blasio and Bruce Ratner is Harold Ickes. I should say the link between Bill de Blasio and the Clintons is Harold Ickes, who's a lobbyist, a powerful, longtime Clinton advisor, who was identified by federal prosecutors as, quote, the Svengali, close quote, behind the campaign finance scandal. That is the 1996 campaign finance scandal. So you look at a guy like Ratner. He comes into Brooklyn 10 years ago, 12 years ago, saying, I am going to develop Atlantic Yards. I'm going to bring thousands of good jobs and thousands of affordable housing units to Brooklyn. There's a huge fight, as you know, over that. Ratner courts the politician, gets hundreds of millions of dollars in state and city aid, which we document in the story, and there's no secret, and then gets Albany to seize the land through what we call eminent domain of state and federal seizure procedure, which allows him to develop it. Now, he made certain promises, again, jobs, housing, and they have not materialized. Now, his people will say they're going to materialize, but meanwhile, Ratner, as he sees more and more control of this project, as he's bought deeper and deeper into it, then he turns around and sells major portions of it to a Russian mogul, a guy named Mikhail Prokhorov, who owns the Barclays Center now, and to a Chinese company controlled by the Chinese government, which is a bunch of communists. So in other words, if you simplify this a little, Ratner comes in, he gets state aid, state and city aid to buy this project, and then he turns around and sells it to the Chinese and the Russians.
And in doing so, passes along all the tax breaks that Forest City Ratner enjoyed in developing the area. And now we're looking at quote-unquote affordable units of housing, and only in New York you can say this, affordable units of housing between $2,500 and $3,500 a month.
Exactly.
It's diabolical in its brilliance, and, and during the comparison to Tammany Hall, there is no